Do you have a favorite?
Not meant to. But mostly the unloved ones. The unvisited ones. The cases that get dusty and ignored. All the broken and shunned creatures. Someone's got to care for them. Who shall it be if not us?
Yes.
Welcome to Rune Soup, a weekly podcast about magic, culture, and the very best new and old ideas for living in this world. Coming to you from 43 degrees south on a small farm in deepest Tasmania. My name is Gordon, and I shall be your host. This week, we welcome to the show artist and imminent co-host Colin Alexander. He joins us today to talk about growing up gay and weird in 90s Scotland, comics, creativity, fortune-telling, and his own curious connections to Madame Lenormand herself. Oh, and obviously, because Colin and I are launching our show, Fortune's Fools, this week, and that will be weekly on YouTube on Thursday evenings for most of you, this is the audio version of a video discussion, so it's another one you might want to hop on over to YouTube to watch. Enjoy. Colin!
Hi!
Look at this, don't we look fancy?
I know we're doing it professionally. That's beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, it's about time. It's been a while.
I mean, this has all been like Twitter DMs and all sorts of DMs for far too long.
Far too long. Now it's time to bring it to the runway. But I mean, this is still. I mean, we're doing a rehearsal for the new show, which we're going to be talking about. But this is still the original show. This is still Buffy. We're not yet at Angel. And so,
oh God, okay.
Right. Hey, Angel ended up being better.
Listen. You give me season 5 of Angel any day. That was
Correct.
Come
on. This is still Rune Soup, and you're a first time guest, Mr. Alexander. So, hit me with it. Were you a weird kid?
So obviously we all know this question. We all see it coming a mile off. And I can see you fully asking this question to people in alleyways on the side of London pubs back in the day. You know, like when you lived in London, obviously. This is the warm up question. And I will say it depends who you ask. I didn't. I thought I was on the up and up. I truly thought I was doing, God's work. I thought I was passing. I thought I was nailing it. I was, but there's other narratives, and that's what's to be said of that. I was I was quite an alone child. So, despite having two siblings, but we are not discussing them at this moment in time. So
not so early in the adventure.
we don't deal with that kind of noise. That's fine.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I was always like an alone child, so I was always kind of off and at the bottom of the garden doing I think I've heard as well people you do you're picking up petals, you're putting them in bottles, you're hoping for the best. This is what you do as a child, right? So yes and no is the answer. I think certainly couldn't be trusted. That's again could not be trusted. I was in a supermarket and I was adventuring off in the aisles, hoping to find something a bit more interesting. I was in the parking lot. I was already making my way downtown. I could not be doing it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So the good kind of not to be trusted, as in by institutions and parents, or the bad kind of not to be trusted, like you stealing your friends' boyfriends.
No, definitely the first kind. No shade to anyone that's doing the second kind, because that's what you do, whatever. But definitely, I knew exactly who I was from a young age. From as early as I could remember, I was doing what I wanted to. Basically, it was pretty good. There is a running joke from the earlier years. There is no memory. There's 5 good memories I have, or just any competent memories of being a child under the age of 10. And there is a running joke that that I was like a changeling, and I've not decided where I fall on that. Like I'm like, well, do I play up to this or do I not? Like,
So is it memories? You only have a few memories of your like previous to 10, or is it other people can only like slightly remember you before you were 10?
no, I can remember them. There are people that walk up to me to this day because I've kind of stayed in the same kind of zone. And they're like, "Oh yeah, we were childhood friends," and I was like, "I have no idea who you are." Like, or just like family memories. And I'm just like, "Great, yeah, that sounds like it would have been fun to have experienced, but that was not my experience." Like, just a very like just a little memory recall. So, but the things I do remember were me being very specific. Let's put it that way. Like I knew what I was doing. I knew what I wanted, and it wasn't often what my parents wanted, and that's fine.
Very good, very good. So I want to ask you. I want to pick up on the memory bit in a second, but and then I'm going to ask you about the area that you grew up in and slash still are in. But
Yes.
memory, especially childhood memories, fucked. I remember this misremembering. The first time my parents took us to Disneyland, I would have been 14, so I was slightly too old for it. But I have two younger brothers, and the middle brother. Like I had this weird OCD thing in my head where I'm like, I want to be the first person in the family like into Disneyland, like through the gates, from the car park into the gates. No reason. It's just you. That's a pointless competition between siblings, and so I did. I actually like set foot into Disneyland before my middle brother, but he remembers because he had the same thought because we're from the same family. He remembers him being the first person through. And we had like several years later when there was no point at the time, but several years later, there was especially no point to this argument. But he's like, no, I was the first one through. And I'm like, I think you'll find you weren't. I have a distinct memory of thinking about it all morning. And he's like, no, so do I. And I'm like, what is this? Is this some sort of Mandela effect? What's going on? But I think it's just memory is treacherous bullshit, and especially when you're that far back. So he and I both to this day, I'm sure if I called him up, I'd be like, I was the first one into Disneyland, and it would be on again, because he'd be like, no, I think you've been. And when it turns out we were both wrong during this argument, Mum was like, I visited on my own in the 70s, so you can both go home.
She said, "Guys, I don't want to hear about any OGs. It was me. That's who it was." Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, like I have memories of as memory as kind of bullshit. I have memories of that kind of late 80s to early 90s like fashion illustration art that people would hang on their walls. It was just like an eyelash.
I think you'll find I'm 25 years old and have no memory of that, but go on.
I mean, I myself am only just 19, so it's fine. And I have this, and there is an Angelica Houston situation in here. I have a very physical memory of this style of fashion, art or whatever. And it's the Ice Queen from Narnia and all that kind of stuff, but it's clearly just a painting. Oh, like I questioned my mother about it, and it's clearly just a painting that she had. And I was like, no, I fully looked out a window one night and saw this bitch like coming down the street, ready. Like she was on a mission. I didn't ask what she was doing. I closed the curtain afterwards. That's like a childhood memory, but she's like, no, it was just a like a cheap Vogue painting, like from 1987. So yeah, like you do like memory as it's interesting, and then it's really not interesting.
Yeah,
but it's also bullshit.
So I mean, given where you kind of went from an academic and creative perspective, it's interesting that one of your early memories is like visual and design based, which we'll get to, I think. Yeah. But like talk about, because you're back in the area, and especially over the last 12 months, we've been DMing about making the best of our geographic opportunities, right? And yours has been a really an interesting kind of like folding back on it. But like, tell us what it was like growing up in the area, and do you still have the same thoughts about where you are now? Because I mean, 2020 notwithstanding, you are still there. So tell us where you're from and what it's like for a weird kid.
The great loop of living where you have lived and continue to live, yeah, sure. During a pandemic where you can live or you have no choice to be anywhere
Yeah.
else. Very interesting, but also, yeah, it's like you're for me here. It's Scotland. It's kind of North Glasgow. There's a lot of we again this kind of shady that two parents would move a gay child from the city centre to a place called Mountain of Campsie, which is where I live. When you grow up kind of like this and it's Mountain of Campsie, it's just like, come on, I did not stand a chance. Um, and also the sort of the etymology of Mountain of Campsie is like crooked fairy path, which is rude. That's rude to me personally, But
That needs to be
definitely,
so
like,
obvious. Yeah.
I mean, come on the nose, I would
Yes.
say. Growing up, so it wasn't one of those angsty needing to. I kind of had designs on traveling and going places. Like anyone that grew up in my sort of phase of life that watched silly sitcoms, you're like, yes, I'm going to go and live in New York. It's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. But there was never like a sense of stuck in a small town. Kind of as you like for a 30+ year experience. There's a push and pull of the situation. And the last year, I think I've been massively grateful for it because literally I've just retreated into the woods and the hills. Just had I been anywhere else with the pandemic and lockdowns and all this, that, and the next thing, I can't imagine how other people have dealt with it because I've just literally become the 13-year-old that I was just spent like 50+% of my time literally retreading old ground, and it's been great. It has kind of been like a saving grace for me, definitely. So, and also I've just moved back into a flat that I lived in 3 years ago. So, in this village, it's definitely you grow to appreciate what it is that I think, even when you maybe are. I had plans to do other things last year.
Well, that's one of the things we're bonded over that sadness, right? We were going to meet in person because you were going to be off on your Miss Edith journeys, like through Asia.
Yes, I was doing like a fun grand tour of the Far East and the Near West and all this and that, the next thing. And I think that the elements of what I was planning to do have kind of happened just in a very different way. And I had visions of Cambodian temples and tree stumps, and it turns out that tree stump was just the tree stump in my back garden, like 20 feet away from me in the trail that I walk almost every day. So it's a mixed bag. What do you do? I am grateful for it and I love it. I've never felt more as a person just doing what I've had to do for the past year. And that is kind of like that is interesting to me anyway.
Well, that's one of the things we'll get to how we know each other, but that's one of the things that I've really resonated with talking to you specifically about over the last year was we both had to do a repositioning based on, because Australians still can't leave the fucking country. So we both had to do a repositioning, and it was sort of the same. It's like you'd message, and we kind of make jokes about the excellent film The Witch. It's like, okay, well, if I'm stuck here, I'm going to be that goth kid that's fucking wandering through the mists of these intractable woods and find the 2 or 3 co-conspirators nearby who will do that. And we lost a lot last year, but that's been a pretty good journey. I don't know how it's been for you.
It has. At the beginning, it was like we were being like a sensible bunch of people. I will not name how many or how few there were, but we were like, right, like, okay, we're not going to like sit and like lick each other's faces and stuff. Cool, whatever. But at the beginning, it was kind of exciting. Like you would hear a helicopter go by. We were on a flight path, right? You would hear a helicopter or a plane, and you're like, "That's it. They're coming for us. We need to go to ground right now." And there's been elements of excitement and normality, and it's just like it was my home before, and now I just feel like, it's just like it's just a place for me. Like it's a place of power. It's a place of all this, that, and the next thing. It's bonkers. Like, I'd honestly, if this, I mean, I guess I would have found, I would have been like, it's not like, I would have been one of those people, I think, that went and did, went to Thailand and went all this, and then would have said, I'm not going to post about it and be like, I'm finding myself, I'm doing my new journey. But I would have been that bitch. I would have been that bitch. You can't not be that bitch when you're going and seeing the world, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm glad I kind of got to do it gracefully, privately. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the month I would have spent in Cusco finishing the book, I would have been insufferable. I'm so glad. And it's funny, you get to the end of not just that personal journey, you get to the end of that personal journey and go, I'm so glad, and I'm glad for the world that I didn't get to be that bitch. And also, you get to the end of it and go, I never want to be it. Social media is trash. So it's been a really good overall growing experience.
You think so I had a year of planning to go like traveling and try to get to as many places as possible. And like as much that like was like, well, I'm not going to be like one of those idiots. Also, I was like, wouldn't it be great to get like a photo or do this, that, the next thing? And then so you're not really experiencing it. So I don't know, like maybe in 100 years time when I do it again, I don't know, I'll hopefully have learned from this experience of the past year that you can just do it semi-privately and that's fine.
Yeah, fingers crossed. But okay, let's get back to kind of like childhood and what came first, because obviously we're embarking on a Lenormand project and you are the artist in said project. So coming back to the weird kid, did magic and strangeness happen first, or did art happen first? Take us through like that phase of your development.
Art I would say art probably happened first, but they're kind of the same thing, so that's fine. Don't worry about it. Definitely, like it was. And again, this was the time to be alive in comics in the 90s. So like, yeah, I was just moving away from, drawing little, diagrams of stars and things and starting to like I was able to walk into a shop and say, I want that magazine, and that magazine happened to be an X-Men comic, like a Jim Lee number. And or a Generation S, like Chris Bachalo and stuff. You just look at this and you're like, oh, there's like a tiny little world inside here. Like that's fascinating. So your little tiny brain just processes it. I think if you want to make stuff, if you want to like do stuff, your tiny little brain just like processes it and thinks, well, I can do that. That's fine. That's cool. That's very satisfying. And that becomes, for me, as someone that does, so that we're talking like from, I would say 8 years old, the process of just, drawing for school purposes or whatever, very much, that is a magical experience. I think it's a magical process because you're just like, no, not this world. We're doing the other world. We're doing this now. Like for like 20 minutes a day, for an hour a day, for 3 hours a day. It was, I would say that definitely the idea of drawing and all that kind of stuff came first, but you quickly get to know what you're doing. You're like, oh, this is some good shit. Like this is not what other people are getting from this experience, maybe, and that would be it.
Cool. So I want to jump in there because let's address the bald elephant in the room. So if we're talking comics in Glasgow in the 90s, there is another Scott that comes to mind. Not quite your neighbor, because
Ellie Diamond.
Yeah, Ellie Diamond. That's she's from Dundee, but we'll allow it. Did you? Because this is interesting. Did you know Grant Morrison stuff at the time? Because I wonder if that's electrifying as you develop into like, oh, I want to do this kind of comics art and similar things as a career, is it kind of weird to know that, well, in fact, one of the biggest names of the time is not quite a neighbor, but not a neighbor. I mean, he's closer than Alan Moore, right?
Yeah. A wee bit.
Yeah.
No. So until like I didn't touch Grant Morrison until like X-Men 2000. I think it's like 2001 or something like that. And I had I had no idea that comics were doing different shit in different areas and different genres. I had my 3 comics and I was quite happy with that. When I did eventually, so that was later in life. Obviously, I was like, I remember actually because that was like, the first X-Men movie. There was massive like PR kind of campaigns that you don't, at that age, at that time, like the late 90s and the early 2000s, you don't realize you're being, worked on by like these like so it was like, oh, you like the X-Men, you're going to watch the movie, you're going to have to read the relaunch, you're going to have to do this, and also, are you done collecting your Batman and Robin pogs? Like, it was one thing to the next with these things. So getting to Grant Morrison and then reading that kind of material was very, very interesting. I was like, okay. Like, it was I would not profess to be some kind of deep and meaningful, like, in my childhood, just reading Mouse or whatever. Like, I was not that bitch. I was reading pretty pictures, hoping for the best. And then I got to that and I was like, yeah, that's pretty. That is, I mean, my tiny great gay brain was doing psychedelics all of a sudden before even touching psychedelics. So it was pretty good. Like, and the idea also that he was Scottish hadn't actually, that again, like, so I just like, apparently in the first half of my life, I just consumed media without really considering it, which that's also what you do as a kid. So I did like, it took me a while to cotton on. It was just, like, he was from like Glasgow and all this. So when I did, I was like, oh, and then also that was actually, I don't know, that may be something to talk about later, but when we first discussed the project, like Lenormand and all that, I was sitting in this cafe in the city centre. We were talking about, all that stuff, like the impossible, the Invisibles and everything. And I was like, oh, like 2 buildings away, like the final issue would have been drawn because that's where like Frank Whiteley has this. So I was more like, for me, the focus was more illustrators, right?
Sure.
So that's where the final issue would have very likely, if not definitely, been drawn, because that was where his studio, he shared it with a bunch of artists. And that's what, you think about that kind of stuff, and you're like, and every time for 20 years you walk through these places and I'm like, there's bitches up there drawing comics and they're really fucking good at it. Like, it's definitely something that weighs on you in a very good way, I think.
Cool. Well, I got to Morrison late as well. The 90s are weird. When I first moved into having a proper job in media, and I was talking to senior people in newspapers who are obviously much older and had been through like the 80s and 90s and hitting the internet phase of the early noughties. One of them said something which has stuck with me, which is, and you can't use the R word anymore, but he said exact words were, you would have to be mentally retarded to not make money in magazines in the 90s. Like, it was impossible not to. When you think about, you were talking about like consuming media in an unthinking way. That's what you did in the 90s. There were indie zines, there were comics. Yeah. That's what you did.
Yeah, even like being like unaware of things, like you clock things like 100 different covers for something. You're like, oh, there's a grift going on here. Like, come on, like you knew something was up, and that was just before. Like, I left reading comics and being kind of interested in them, just kind of as that all collapsed, because I think everyone was just exhausted with it. We're like, fuck this shit. We don't like you just, so for, again, so I did, I think Frank Whiteley, Grant Morrison and the New X-Men that was my like thing back into comics, like, because it was just trash for like 3 years, like from 97 to kind of like, it was just, you were just like, this is ridiculous. I think also as you grow up, you realize maybe the storytelling is geared in a different, like you start, I guess that was just a case of me maturing as a reader. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you age out of what they thought the target demographic is, and I
Yeah.
think that's one of the reasons comics and comic movies and the world of comics is just so terrible now, and consequently, it's not making any money except for movies. So,
Well, that's it. Like, there's pockets of it, but you really have to just, from what I've seen and from what I can tell of how people talk about it, as you really have to zigzag in there. It's just like you have to market yourself just to pass so many silly things. And it's just, and you're just like, so we're not storytelling anymore. Is that we're just we're marketing? Everyone's their own marketing exec now, and it's just it's exhausting. 2 years, like the reason I decided to go traveling, because also I was that age, and that's what you do. You go eat, pray, love, and all that shit. But the year before, I was like, oh, I'm gonna make a really concerted effort and get into this and do like cover art and do da 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 da. And then the more I just was like getting into it on Twitter, I was just like, this is, I mean, the people, everyone in every side of every argument hates working for, like, they hate working in comics, they hate doing it, they hate what they have. And no one is just saying this is bullshit. Like, no one is saying I don't enjoy the process of getting my story into another mind. Do you know? And it's just like, well, so there was for me, there was like a 2-year process of, things basically collapsing. And
yeah, and it is like that's across all media, right? So
yeah,
people have to play this horrible game that they don't enjoy to get access to positions that are effectively fictional. So magazines or comics issues that 2 decades ago would sell 100,000 a week now sell 10,000 a week, and that's fake because they're bulked up with like convention numbers. So that's like everyone who shows up, the 5,000 people who show up to a convention get a free issue. So that's 5,000 issues that are sold worldwide when it used to be 100,000. So it's like there's no jobs left, and everyone's hating each other to get to this thing that doesn't even exist anymore. And that's TV. That's like, obviously I'm a huge fan of Tim Dillon, and he talks about that on the Patreon all the time, which is one of the reasons he left LA was not just because Newsom has ruined the state. It's that why I'm not trying to get anything that LA has to offer. I don't want a sitcom. Like, I have my own audience. I have my own stand-ups. I've done that. So why would I work for someone else to reach fewer people than I could do myself? And I think this is a reckoning that's coming for everything. And it's certainly, I don't know, I'll ask you this. What do you think that looks like for comics? Do you think it looks like projects like this?
Yeah, I would say like so when you first approached me, like it kind of evolved and developed and all that kind of stuff. But I remember reading something you wrote, and you were like, we need to go back to analog, and this is the forward motive. It's the forward motivation for what you need to do it to create, I think. And that doesn't mean you're just handing out like issues to people. Although that would be a fun idea, just to throw comics at people on the street. But I think just repositioning how like if you're a storyteller of anything. And for me, that's a very, very broad category. How do you want that? How do you want your story to be perceived? And how do you want to go about once you've done it, how do you want to go about telling it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And is this worth it? Did you do this? Everyone does anything creative, and it is a bit of it's a struggle bus. Like, no one expects it to be easy. No one expects to make money off of it. But do you want to enjoy it, or do you want to hate it by the time you're finished with it? Like, do you know what I mean?
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. There's been a couple of options in the media career where I could have gone editorial, and I stayed commercial the whole time. And it's because half my friends were journalists at magazines or whatever, and they all had half-finished novels or novels that they would work on the weekend, or they take annual leave and go and do it. And they would be so ground down by having to do the day-to-day of journalism. And also there's only so many, it's like, I'm sure it's like any creative thing. There's actually only so many words that can come out of you in a day. And so if you're doing that for a job, if you're covering sports in Auckland and you hate sport, and then you're supposed to get home fresh and work on your, like, you know, pot boiler.
Great Auckland novel.
It doesn't work. So I was jealous of them, because when you have commercial jobs, they're a different kind of fun. Once you get the credit card and you can take the ad agency twinks out for lunch and cocaine, it's great. But before you get to that, it's terrible. It's like phone sales and all the rest of that kind of shit, right?
Yeah.
But I could come home a bit drained, certainly, but the tank was fuller that allowed me to do things like blog and what have you. So I think this moment is an invitation, doesn't matter what it is you do. This moment is an invitation to really look at it and go, is this worth it? Is this actually what you thought it was going to be? Are there other ways, as we're in, you know, the final years of recognizable Western civilization? Is this how you want to go down?
So when you look back at the 2 years of so I'm thinking of comic creators and the mundane struggle on things like Twitter that you have to do and Instagram, all this kind of stuff. Is that really how you want to have spent the time that you could just be just doing the fucking story and just get it to 100 people? Like, just get it to 100 people and you'll be cool. You'll be fine. Like, engage the people that you walk out in the street. Try, like, you know, instead of, you know, just throwing vitriol at strangers and hoping for the best and hoping that it's
exactly.
They agree with.
Is this still working for you? Are you happy with the direction your career and industry is going? Are you spending your day doing
this thing on? Like, it's rotten. I think from being very idealistic, I was never an idiot with it. I was never like, I'm going to be a superstar. Like, never. I was like this. From the minute I started, I've studied things at college in illustration and design and things. It was always going to be, there's always an element of labor, because of course it's work, it's you know, a story is a job, so that's fine. But the added layer of what we have to do now, just to like pierce the layer and get seen, is like, oh, we're all just performing a kind of, I can't, like, they use, I mean, I guess for a period you used to just hire people that would do this for you. That there was a you know, data, like, well, you do data strategy, right?
Yeah.
There were teams of people that this was their job and that were passionate, they knew what they were doing. And now you just have to do that on top of everything else. And if you don't have that blue tick on Twitter, then God fucking help me.
The actual creation of a comic is marketing material for your actual full-time job, which is more than full-time, which is managing your brand online for reasons that are not clear. Like, because they actually don't, and this is another thing I could speak to, there is zero correlation. This might sound weird, but you can't, if you're in the 50,000 follower-ish area, you can just stop tweeting and your products will sell the same, because it's actually, all these social platforms pretend for their benefit that they're helping you reach customers, but it's not actually the case. It's just that people tell people in their lives if they like something, if they like a book or a comic, and those other ones will go out and get it. They may happen to be on Twitter or Instagram, but it's actually it's an interference field rather than a way of finding people. Like it's a great illusion to sort of wake up from, and I hope more. I don't think they will, but I hope more people do.
No, I think we've got a bit more of a downturn to go before people realise that it's kind of a scam, kind of. And listen, it is universal. Like, it's drag race, it's drag. All that, everything's becoming. You have to be your, like, branding is fun because that's like old magic, right? That's like cool stuff. But everyone has to be a brand. Everyone, like some second contestant on Drag Race has to be a brander, they're a loser. Like, it's dehumanizing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And you're also just like, oh, these people don't have any talent because they don't have the 50,000 followers, they don't have the blue tick, they don't have the exact specific kind of editing that you need to be like considered like funny. You know, there is a mechanism that's just at play for everything, and it is quite menacing, I think, in a way. And that's why I was in the woods for the past year. Just pandemic said, I was like, you know what, fuck this shit.
Yeah. No, I absolutely get it. And it kind of brings me back to the Bayo Komalafe thing, which was my inspiration for this project, which is the small moves against daunting challenges. It's actually the polished monoliths, because they are identical to fakeness now. It's, you know, Facebook deplatforms doctors who are giving congressional testimony to the US Congress. Like these managed edifices are so anti-human that you're on them and you're like, why do I have a metallic taste in my mouth? Why does my whole world feel like I'm smelling the back of a computer? And it's because you're in the presence of that and you're looking for something else. So one of the things I'm really interested in is what we can how we can use these increasingly complicit and compromised digital platforms to promote something like the Fortune's Fools project of bringing people together in time, if not in place. And I think, and crucially, and this comes back to managed brands and data teams and the rest of it, I don't know what that's going to look like, because if I knew what it was going to look like, it would be part of the old story, because part of the old story is 5-year plans and managing rather than like being present, right? Rather than like being present or making sanctuary in the cracks, which Bayo Komalafe says without irony. And yeah, so that's something I'm kind of excited about, is that play of creativity and distributed humans and how we can be together in time, if not in place. Or a better way of saying that is bringing place into the same sort of time-based context, because from an animist perspective, you're never not made up of the place you are in. So a Zoom call is kind of interesting from that perspective, because yes, it's humans coming together in time, but it's humans who are relationally composed of their places. So you can, when you even just open it up to that, it's like, wow, my river is on Zoom. Like that's, and I feel two things about that at once.
Yeah, she's that river is getting out there. She's doing what she can.
She's got a hashtag. Follow her on Insta.
She's got a hashtag. I'm saying this, but like obviously, yeah, totally. Like you have like that is you have to be two-minded about these things, because we're not done with them just yet, sadly. No. Like, and authenticity has not yet quite forced its way back into people's minds. Like we're really just at the nadir of things. Like we're just nearly getting started, but we're not quite there yet.
Yeah, I think so. But
we can be there, you know.
Oh no, I mean we'll just solve it for everyone, Colin. This will be fine.
Oh yeah. I'm just like, as I'm looking here on the green screen, I'm just seeing the Drag Race YouTube video editing, so it's like little, you know, text messages and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, I'm gonna go and leave.
Let's talk about magic then. When did you you read Grant? Did Grant get you into it? Did you find other stuff at the time? When did you start kicking the tires on that kind of stuff? And actually, adding to the weird kid, like there was no, other than seeing some sort of Angelica Houston poster out the window. Any other kind of like high strange stuff that pulls you into fucking about with that stuff? When did you first put on the witch fingers?
Oh God, the witch! Come on, now. I wish I was wearing them. So obviously, I'm a child of the 90s of an indeterminate age. So there was no chance for me. There was no option. Like I was getting Sabrina, I was getting Buffy, I was getting The Craft, I was getting Practical Magic. It was young enough and old enough just to get the full fucking spectrum. So that was the introduction to like the form of that kind of stuff. And like I get the branding of that kind of stuff. I would say pretty late on. So I was just like, got that stuff. And then the minute I was able to just like leave and go into the city, you know, like to go to a bookshop, that was like, and it wasn't great to begin with, let me tell you. It was looking at books about your star sign and stuff, like your zodiac, and you know, you're basically like your first forays into looking into these things is looking into yourself and like, how is this about me? Like, you're like, how does this apply to me, and how am I the star of this? But definitely those kind of things were the introduction to the idea that magic was not just something you did at the bottom of your garden. It wasn't just popping a petal into like something and hoping for the best, or just feeling or having really weird dreams, or having really, you know, having really odd misremembered memories. And then it was like the sort of, I would say it was the your sort of early puberty where it's like it's sleep paralysis experiences where you're just like, what the fuck? Like you really start reacting, which is a thing that you do. You start reacting to things that are happening to you and that you're experiencing, and hope that like you start reaching out in different avenues than just watching a really good episode of Buffy. So I think I would say it was later on than like a childhood experience for me. It was definitely and also watching how people reacted to you. So as like a gay kid and all this crap, right? You're already different just by cutting about and doing what you're doing. Yep. So it was just interesting to look at all these parallels of things that are happening in your own experiences, and then looking at people sort of looking at you different and treating you different. And then just kind of it all coalesces kind of in that like that stage of, I'm going to say like, let's call it 13, right? Sleep paralysis, demons, all that shit, like weird shit happening to you. It's a horrible time. It's at the best of times a horrible time for any human being. And I was just like, all right, okay, so what is this? What can I do? And that was the first point, I think, in my that I can remember, where I was like, how can I reapproach this from what I've been taught, or from the world I've been brought in? Like, what am I doing here? What am I going to do about this?
Yeah.
And it's just been like a spread out from there, basically.
You're right. There's absolutely no hope for early millennials. Buffy, Angel, The Craft, Charmed, even some of the weirder bits of Deep Space Nine. I would also throw other ones in there that I used to watch, like watching Twin Peaks too young. There was a whole bunch of stuff that happened in the 90s where it's like, if it was an accidental MK Ultra project to make witches and magicians.
100%.
Like if it was a real MK Ultra project, they didn't make very good ones. So that's why I think it was an accident. But there's kind of no hope. And it's really interesting you talk about it being involved in your identity formation, because it was for me too, to the extent that it took me too long to work out I was gay, and I'd been with guys beforehand, which is just, I just thought I was cool, right? Because I'd found magic first, and that allowed me this kind of like really shitty take on like 90s chaos magic identity, and how there's no, you know, like it's not like a fixed gender thing. Maybe I'm bi or whatever, but I associated my uniqueness compared to my peers with my magic. They all worked out that actually quite a lot of it was because he's gay, and we'll just wait for him to work that out. But magic kind of, it literally got in the way of it. And then it was, I had an ex-girlfriend who was also gay tell me, we should talk. And then she had to explain it to me. I'm like, I see, you may be onto something. But magic got in the way of me realizing that, because that 90s brand of magic afforded that kind of identity refuge for the different.
Yeah, totes. And it was, but then it was all, totally. And it's like, oh, but I'm different, so that we don't have to think about anything. So I'm different, but I don't have to deal with this right now. Yeah, and then obviously that collapses 5 years later. So that's also part of that experience. I think that decade is just like it's a real up and down. Like you're like, oh yeah, this is it. This is what this is, and then you're like, oh, this isn't what this is. Like you're just going back and forth with it. Like like the fabric feels nice, but the garment does not fit. It's just not
Yeah, I get it.
appropriate. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I keep saying, do you know what? I'm actually Bimini Bon Boulash. I'm a South London.
Well, I was going to do a drag reference there. You're talking about the fabric's good, but it doesn't fit. It's like you can see your padding. It's not well constructed. It's green. Michelle doesn't like it.
It's a bit. So you get there, and then that's like, so for me that was that was getting through, I would say, the 90s and then the early 2010s, and then just thinking, honestly, so the 2010s, we'll say, you type in like a selection of like any three occult terms, and you come to two people at that, and it's you and it's Sarah Ann Lawless, and I think that's a pretty good cocktail.
Yeah, it's cool.
So that's when it starts to kind of really branch out, and you're like, oh shit. So one person's doing one thing, one person's doing the other thing, and you're really seeing the spectrum of what this is. And that's like, yeah. So I would say like my journey was a slog, but like I kind of got there in the end, so that's fine.
Well, so speaking of Glaswegians, right? Grant Morrison likes that 11-year sun cycle model for understanding motifs in creativity. So the 90s is very magic heavy and even very kind of like utopian space, like Fifth Element and DS9 and whatever. And the noughties can be summed up with Sex and the City. So it's actually but it's hyper-capitalist magic like the kind of magic phase ends with the release of the Lord of the Rings films. And then we have a decade of Reaganorchy, basically. Like it's hyper-capitalist and it's very materialist. And you hit to about 2010, 2012. And I've actually written about this because obviously I'm going to attribute this to Nicki Minaj, but things like Starships, when that comes out, it's like, okay, we're back on psychedelics and back on the magic thing. This is the next 11-year sun cycle, which interestingly, with that model in mind, we are coming to the end of it in the next couple of years. And it does feel like that, right? Like there is so much, the different worlds inside what we'd call magic, and you can argue the toss whether they belong there or not, like astrology and tarot and so on, are having their own cytokine storm collapses because it's just time. It's what happens. But it's sort of interesting, like the noughties, everyone took some time off because that's when I was in New Zealand and my career was getting going, and I always still identified as a magician. But once, I was making good money, I'd met James. I'm like, what do I need to be toddling off out into the woods in the middle of the night for at the moment? And it was kind of nothing. So there was time off there as well. But yeah, once arriving back in the UK, I don't know if I've ever told anyone this, because like Rune Soup started a few months after I spent the 3 months in London after Lehman Brothers collapsed, not getting a job and running through all the money. And then I accidentally found a job, which I wasn't looking for with the BBC. And when I say I wasn't looking for it, it's because I was looking for a call center job on Gumtree in Bristol. And then it turned out that's where the BBC was advertising for Bristol. So we moved out there. And I had lost all my money and I was massively depressed and discombobulated. But I'm like, this is Bristol. This is kind of like ground zero for a lot of, not necessarily ground zero, but it's like a holy site for chaos magic, because this is where Pete Carroll's from. And there's a whole bunch of West Country stuff going on there. And little did I know that the apartment that I'd moved into, the alley at the back of it, literally is how you get to, I don't know if he still has the business, but that's where Pete's business was. So Rune Soup started, I shit you not, 50 meters that night from where Pete Carroll actually works. And that was the sort of beginning of my rediscovery of it too, because magic and depression don't go well together. And I was too depressed and I desperately needed it, trying to do magic in London to fucking get a fucking job, right? Yeah. And when you're depressed, you're not it's very challenging to be aware of your relationality with different beings and so on. So apparently it was working according to the cards, which also I felt nothing as I was reading them, like it's literally checking the book. But yeah, it all kind of, it's a switch, it's a solar switch or something. It hit 2008, 2009, and it all came back. But I did not take a few years off, but there was something about the early noughties that just didn't scream magic in the way the 90s did.
It was all the low-rise genes, I would suggest. There was a lot.
How can
there was
I
a lot
blame?
going on, and magic was really the last thing to be considered.
How can I blame Anastasia? I'm out of love.
Please do not take her name in vain.
Wait, that was 90s. It's gonna be.
No, she bridged that.
She did, but I'm sure
like,
I'm out of love must have been 90s. Anyway, I feel like there's gonna be a lot of this when we actually get to the show. Like dumb gay references, and now that I have this new setup that I don't quite know how to use, we'll be able to jump on the internet because everyone will love that. Everyone will love us finding out exactly when "I'm Out of Love" by Anastasia was released. I think that's a great way to involve people in the creation of a card set.
Listen, it's going to be great for her career. That's what I'll say. It's going to work out for Anastasia. Yeah, you're saying, Bruce, as out the back, an alleyway's distance from this chaos magic dude, and here we are doing this, embarking on a Lenormand project, and as you came to me, and I was like, at first I was like, well, what could this possibly be that he is after? What are we looking at here? And I was like, oh, maybe a little illustration or something. And then it was this, and then I think I was like, never heard of it in my life. I think you covered it in your tarot course, and I was like, oh, interesting character, cool. And as I got into it, I was looking at the history of, Madame Lenormand, the character, the woman, the historical figure, and I'm like seeing little blips of, when you look at something and you're really, again, how do I make this about me? That's so in her later life, and the last 4 or 5 years of her life, she was embroiled in this legal case where, this woman was again, chef's kiss. She was a con artist who had delivered on the goods. Do you know what I mean? She could fortune tell, but she was a con artist.
Yeah. It's like Michelle Visage's relationship to singing. She can do it.
Yeah.
but it's really more about everything else.
Just to, let RuPaul do it. So this court case, because of where I live in Scotland, I was seeing Stirling, and this was an Earl of Stirling that she was trying to connive this random dude that was everyone in Scotland and everyone in the diaspora of where people got sent and all that kind of stuff. Everyone has some throne that they have some kind of thought that they think they should be sitting on. And she had found the one guy that could. She was like, "This is a good one. This one can make me some money." And this guy, Alexander Humphreys Alexander, tried to basically become the Earl of Stirling, which in their lifetime, in their period, and by 1839, by the time this case was coming to a close, the title had been dormant for about 100 years, and this dude, the title of Earl of Stirling, that's where I live. It went on to become baronets and all this kind of everything changes and everything becomes something else. But the region
you're in was under the when the Earl of Stirling was an active title, you were in its imprint.
Yes. Yeah. I could throw this iPad right now to the house that the house in the estate that would have been there. It's been their estate for 500 years, So there was this direct connection. I was like, oh, as I'm literally lighting fires in the woods around this fucking mansion, and it's a gorgeous building. There is this connection is kind of bubbling up, and I'm seeing more of it. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, that's cool. Again, so you're like within proximity of, and I'm going to suggest now, early call, I think Madame Lenormand might be a hero of mine.
Oh yeah,
Possibly.
totally.
I think she's
Yeah.
like a real customer. So yeah, I think that's maybe just like that's the next a signal for the next, I don't know, the next creative 10 years of whatever we're in. Do you know what I mean? Where that's what's happening.
Yeah,
But
I think so. I think she's a marvelous way into how I understand fortune telling and why, right? And why fortune telling, which I wrote about in the announcement post for this, fortune telling is the right mode for this moment, because divination is this grandiose Freemasonic male idea that he's so intelligent. And it's not like divination actually doesn't mean that. It means like learning things from the divine or study of the divine, right? But when we're talking about it in the world of magic, divination is typically a florid description of something that has historically been and is cross-culturally much more down and dirty and much more liminal, and always has an element of scam, like in the iconic sense of it. And Lenormand has that, and to the point that her reputation so unevenly preceded her that the cards we're going to be creating, so the Lenormand deck, and we'll talk about this in the first episode in a way, we'll recapitulate some, she had nothing to do with, as far as anyone can tell, but it was enough. I just, there's something delightfully, not necessarily scammy about this, because she did appear to have some talent, and she was using playing cards and probably her own version of the Atea. So she was in the mix and was quite good at fortune telling, but she was arguably better at the theatrics, right? And
yes, the storytelling.
Yeah. And that is perfect.
Gorgeous. Like just from like reading like first-hand accounts from people that went to see it, like the description is just, it's just everything you would imagine a fortune teller to be. But also they're like, oh yeah, and also she nailed every detail of it. Like it's just stunning. Yeah. Like
it's everything you imagine, but she's also goals. Like she's, she would have bats in like nailed to the walls in the parlor, and you go, this is some Halloween chic shit. And 19th century Paris, like having outside of your waiting room, and you kind of move into her room, and she's doing phrenology on your head, probably for nothing, maybe checking your earrings,
witch finger realness, that's what she was given.
No, exactly.
I think yeah, definitely. Like, I mean, that there hasn't been some crap movie about her already. Do you know, like, just the story of it, like, it's insane, just gorge.
Yeah, that's why she and the cards and everything are at this moment. It's been fun because I did mention her in the tarot course, but I've been talking about the Lenormand, which has been my go-to for the last couple of years, more or less. I've been talking about it a lot, and it's been fun to see the uptick amongst members and other people in the imprint of the show and whatever, going like, oh, this is quite good. So I'm hoping that we can. And hear me when I say it this way, hoping we can restore Madame Lenormand's reputation to where I believe it to be, which is, just as we discussed, like an iconic an iconic grand final queen at the very least.
Absolutely. We are talking all stars here. Like, come on. Totally. Like, I think that would be like, because a lot of the decks, there's a lot of gorgeous decks as well that exist, like Lenormand decks, but they don't place that story, I think, importantly enough. Like,
agreed.
Just do you know what I mean? Like that,
yeah, absolutely. Well, so that, I mean, when just in terms of the origin of the project, you literally just popped into my head when I was thinking, like, I'm cool to do something. It's collaborative. It's cards. It's definitely not tarot. I love the tarot, obviously. I'm like, I think it's Colin. And I think it's because we have that same appreciation for a certain type of being, especially if it's a woman. Like I knew you could find my Lenormand. I knew you could find her and be like, oh yeah, I get her. And I'm not sure if anyone's done that. I'm not sure if anyone's done that sort of necromancy. And then it turns out you have a direct connection to the last few years of her life. And it's interesting you say lighting fires not like around the mansion in an attempt to destroy it, but does that mean that some of the last year you spent in the woods, was that in that same imprint of the former title of the Earl of Stirling? Have you been wandering around the woods that she was scamming for the last year?
Well, we were in there, and there was always, again, just because of the situation and like the elements of what we're doing in the last year. You already feel like you're you're an outlaw doing, like, you're just like, just walking in the woods feels like an act against the law, which is bizarre. But definitely we were as I came to understand that there was like this connection, like with the estate and with the family name and with her sort of actions to, con the face off of them. And we're talking, by the way, we are talking billions in dollars, from their tip from inflation. Like, we are talking. This was
the heist. This was the fucking Ocean 11 shit.
She was going out in style. She was not having. She was like, I'm going to be having this. But yeah, definitely. Just like literally a couple of weeks, maybe last month. We were doing our usual. We have so we've had this year. So we have different seasons. So we go to different places, which are more. That lend themselves better to privacy and, like fire and firewood, all this kind of stuff. All the nonsense of being a feral bitch in the woods, right?
Yeah.
No bother, and all the time we're like, we're going to get caught. There is that element of you are getting away with it, which is very exciting. So just this last month, doing what we do and absolutely no harm to anyone. A golf cart comes out of nowhere, and it's the current Laird Stirling. So the titles all changed now, so we don't have earls anymore. We do like a Laird. I said to my friend Stevie, who she's just like, who the fuck is this? Like, what's that? Again, because you don't go into these places. You have an idea, but there's no active element of, oh, this dude in the mansion owns everything. Like, you don't think about it.
Yeah.
And I was just like, right, let me do the talking here. Let's see what happens. So this guy comes out, Laird, a total tit, right? Like, he's gorgeous, like this full caricature of what you think that would be.
A Laird would be, yeah.
A Laird would be. And with so it clocked that we were teenagers, drinking, and we were drinking,
rude.
But we weren't like. Yeah. We were, I know, right? It's like, how dare you?
You are much too old for this, sir. Yeah.
And as soon as I figured out who he was, again, because there's no these people aren't famous anymore. They're just there in the shadows doing what they do. It turned into like this interview. Like, I was basically rune souping him. I was like, so tell me, do you understand that, what's happening here? Do you understand the family history? Like, I was literally I was trying, and I was pretending to be, I pretended to be like a history, something or other, right? I was basically trying to get him. I was pumping this dude for information, right? And it felt very like, all right, like, she's not done and she might have a chance yet. We might sneak her in.
Yeah.
So very, very much like my plan is, once this is all done and dusted and we have like a solid deck, I'm secreting her in there one way or another.
Let's even maybe be a bit more ambitious. Like, is the property big enough to have an exhibition? Could she?
Well, they used to do art festivals and stuff. So
let's get her in then. She'll fucking. That's probably why she pinged me to ping you. She'll finally get her claws on it. That's.
She would die happy. She already did.
Yeah.
I would also die happy. That would be amazing. We may have to cautiously approach them and, like with a bit of reverence, but I'm sure they love that shit. So they love
So the
history.
project, there's 36 cards in the Lenormand, and we're starting with the 0 to, which isn't this one. It'll be later in the week for people watching it. Thursday evening for most people.
Yeah.
So we've got 37 weeks for you to ingratiate yourselves to them. So
and I feel like I left them on good terms. So
well, now you don't even need to pretend to be an historian. You can say, I'm actually involved in like an international art project that's to do with this woman who was trying to scam her way, trying to scam this former title out of a bunch of money. That again will be interesting to them. So maybe don't open with it. We got the time. She will guide you as she sees fit, because I think it's a thing she wants.
I truly feel there has to be something. There has to be like that is a good bookend for the story of Lenormand. I think.
And we will probably elevate her, especially as if she gets closer doing it, to one of those almost not like Loire, because that's a Vaudun term, but one of those types of beings that are available for people in a fortune telling thing. So like Queen Maria Padilla is a kind of like folk saint for Kimbanda, because she was posthumously crowned queen. So she's a queen in hell, right?
Yeah.
And so what's female earl? Is that a thing?
I don't know if there was a female earl. There were barons and baronetesses.
So we might find her. We might find
a baronetess.
Yeah. She might end up getting a posthumous title and then be available as this being. That will be fun. So the project just got exactly. So the project just got quite necromantic as well as being fortune telling, which feels right. I'm glad we had this call. Yeah, I'm super looking forward to it. And I think this has been, for people, we were joking about it before we hit record. This is a dress rehearsal because I don't know how to use this software that makes it look like I'm in the sea and you're floating above in safety, and you're stuck looking at just me with a green screen behind. So, the magic of cinema. Yeah.
We've suffered through worse, so we'll be fine.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, we're going to talk again at the end of the week, but as we come to the end of the episode, people that are just being introduced to you and want to follow up, obviously fortunesfools.runesoup.com, and indeed the YouTube channel that you are watching this on, those of you watching it, is where you find the show, and it's going to be weekly Thursday nights. Join the chat. It's open to anyone. The chat will be on YouTube itself. So, jump in, and we're going to be going card by card and soliciting suggestions and advice. And also, crucially, I think, for people who work with the Lenormand cards already, feedback about their experiences with, if it happens to be like the Lily or the Anchor or what have you. And out of this kind of collaborative process, we're going to go card by card and end up with a Fortune's Fool's tarot deck that we will then install in the Earl of Stirling's former house.
Now, what am I going to wear for that? That is the big question. What does one wear to a necromantic haste? Honestly,
you will ask
a reverse haste.
Yeah. She'll find something for you.
It's going to be bats. It's going to be witch fingers. That's cool.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But anyway, let people know where they can find you and so on.
I have a website. You can check out my work. I am colinalexanderdraws.com, and on Instagram at colinalexanderdraws, and that's where I am. And also every Thursday here. So for the foreseeable future.
And a Patreon.
Oh well, yeah. We'll figure that out. There's going to be.
There will be a Patreon.
There's going to be a lot of process, so that's going to be fun.
But that's where I mean, because people who want to, like, you can come through the Patreon or the website if they want to commission you or talk about that kind of stuff as well. So we're going to mention it there. Yeah, it's the account is made. Let's say it that way.
That's the Untucked situation.
Yeah, because we'll save that.
I got a lot of behind the scenes stuff, and I think that's gonna be really fun because that's something that I've never done before, where it's like we're doing from the beginning to the end, and everyone's out here just putting their 2 cents in and enjoying it and being part of it. So yes,
And the process stuff I think is crucial. Like I'm really interested in that. I'm really interested in. So the way it's going to work is we have discussed this. If people are expecting some kind of Rolf Harris situation where you're going to be drawing on the fly, that is not what's going on. This is a quality production, and what it means is we'll be talking about the anchor, and then that week soliciting feedback and ideas, and then that week you'll be working on the anchor, and then we'll be on to the next card come the Friday. But over the course of that week, you're going to be sitting with the ideas and they'll be like, I'm trying this and thinking that. Switch on the camera. That's the untucked behind the scenes about what's going on. We have some fun possibilities about what you and I could do on the Patreon.
Guys, it does involve alcohol, and that is absolutely beneficial to the process.
Absolutely. And why that's going to be weird is because for me it's very early in the morning, so it involves alcohol and the least appropriate day drinking. The least appropriate.
We'll figure out a more amenable time so that we're meeting in the middle.
No, it's fine.
Yeah. No, 9 o'clock in the morning is fine. That's fine.
Clear the calendar. Awesome. All right. Yeah. So this is all going to be in the show notes, of course. We're starting this week. I'm super excited. Coming to the end of the Angel course, just finishing up the book. It's one of those which I knew it was going to be, and I will actually discuss it as the project, the Fortune's Fool project, carries on. But some stuff had to happen that kind of like your experience with the literal shade of Lenormand. Some stuff had to happen in the right kind of sequence, particularly angelic advice that came out of doing all the angel scrying as a result of the course that's been implicated, that this all had to happen at this certain week. And this is that hyperdimensional week for me where I would have been today. It's Monday morning for me. I would have been in London, but then I was going off on my kind of astro journey through Spain and then into France. And there was a Lenormand aspect of that going on there. So I'm at like that weird 1 year cycle. All these things kind of come together that mean this is the week that was supposed to happen. Like you were saying before, last year felt like a weird finding a local version of what you were going to find in far-flung corners. There's something about this project that is to do with it, and I don't pull on the thread too much because, again, fortune telling is being present for the moment rather than having a highly competent 5-year plan about where Bitcoin's going or something, which is going up, but that doesn't matter.
I will be doing NFT art or whatever.
Oh my God, we must an ironic NFT. Yeah, and ironic, like an NFT under protest. Oh my God, totally.
NSFW, we're doing the full spectrum. We're doing it.
Awesome. Well, this is great. This has been great. And what I'm going to end on is I'm going to try and find what is going to be the intro video for each of our shows, which James has put together. But good sir, I shall see you in a few days. Thank you very much.
See you next Thursday.